Chinedu Okoro stood by the big glass windows in his very fine house. The lights of the city shone so bright outside, but inside him, there was no happiness. At 38 years old, Chinedu was rich and had done well in life. He owned many big businesses, a beautiful house, and cars that many people could only dream about. But none of these things made him truly happy. Deep inside, he felt very alone. Chinedu had tried to get married 2 times, but both times ended badly. Each time, his heart felt more broken, and he decided he would not trust anyone with his feelings again. Now, he only focused on his work. But one thought kept coming back to him: who would carry on his family name? He had no wife, no child, and no one to leave all his success to. He wanted someone to be his heir, someone to continue the Okoro name and the big businesses he had built. While Chinedu sat in his quiet, lonely house, Ifiok Akpan sat on the cold ground by a busy road. Her head was bent down over a piece of dirty cardboard as she drew with a pencil. Ifiok was only 26, but life had been very hard for her. She had no home and no one to help her. Drawing was the only way she could escape from her troubles. Once, Ifiok had dreamed of being a great artist. She had gone to art school, and her teacher said she had a very special talent. But after her mother died and her father left her, everything fell apart. She had no family, no money, and nowhere to go. She had to leave school. Now, she sat on the street every day, drawing pictures to try and forget the pain in her heart. People walked past her, too busy to even notice her. Ifiok's pencil moved quickly, drawing the face of a woman who was crying. She didn't draw for money or to become famous. She drew to let out all the feelings she kept inside. Chinedu and Ifiok lived in completely different worlds, but their lives were about to meet. Neither of them could guess how much everything was about to change. Chinedu Okoro sat in his shiny black car, tapping his fingers on the steering wheel. He had made up his mind. He would find a way to have a child. He didn't want love or marriage, he just wanted an heir. To him, this was like making a business deal, something he knew how to handle. Driving through the city streets, Chinedu looked at the world outside his dark windows. The noise, the confusion, the people, none of it touched him. He felt like someone watching from the outside. As he stopped at a red light near the center of the city, his eyes saw something unusual. A young woman was sitting on the ground by the road, her head bent over a piece of cardboard. Her brown hair looked messy, and her clothes were old, but she wasn't begging or holding up a sign. Instead, she was drawing. Chinedu looked closer, curious. She seemed completely lost in what she was doing, her pencil moving quickly over the cardboard. People walked past her without even a quick look, but she didn't seem to care. There was something about her that caught his attention, a quiet strength in the way she focused, as if the noisy world around her didn't exist. The light turned green, and the car behind him honked impatiently. Chinedu drove on, but he kept thinking about the woman on the sidewalk. Who was she? Why was she there? And why couldn't he stop thinking about her? A few blocks later, Chinedu found himself driving into a parking lot. He sat there, staring at the steering wheel. This is foolish, he said to himself, but the feeling wouldn't go away. Before he could change his mind, Chinedu turned the car around and drove back to where he had seen her. She was still there, now shading in part of her drawing. He parked by the side of the road and rolled down his window. "Hey, you," he called out. The woman looked up, her blue eyes looking at him carefully. "What do you want?" she asked, her voice sounding firm but also a little worried. "Come here," Chinedu said, his voice calm but commanding. She hesitated, holding her pencil tightly. "Why, I want to talk," he said simply. Her lips tightened, and for a moment, Chinedu thought she would ignore him. But then, slowly, she stood up and walked over to the car. Up close, she looked even younger than he had thought, but there was a tiredness in her eyes that showed she had lived a hard life. "What do you want?" she asked again, her voice sharper this time. Chinedu hesitated, realizing he hadn't planned exactly what to say. He decided to keep it simple. "Get in the car. I'll take you somewhere warm, and we can talk." The woman laughed, a bitter sound. "I'm not stupid." "I'm not here to hurt you," Chinedu interrupted. "I have something to offer you, something that could change your life. But I'm not going to explain it out here." She looked at him carefully for a long moment, then glanced at his expensive car. "Why would a man like you want to help someone like me? You'll understand if you come with me," Chinedu said. "If not, fine, stay here." After a moment of thinking, she sighed and got into the car. As Chinedu drove, the silence between them felt heavy. Finally, he broke it. "What's your name?" "Ifiok," she said quietly. "Ifiok Akpan, I'm Chinedu Okoro," he replied. Ifiok didn't say anything, but her hands moved nervously in her lap. Chinedu glanced at her. "I'll explain everything when we get there." The car turned into the parking lot of a quiet restaurant. Chinedu led Ifiok inside and chose a table in a corner, away from the other people. "So," Ifiok said, crossing her arms, "what's this all about?" Chinedu leaned forward, his face serious. "I need someone to have a child for me, and I'm willing to pay you more money than you've ever seen in your life to do it." Ifiok blinked, completely surprised and silent. "You're joking, right?" "No," Chinedu said calmly. Ifiok stared at Chinedu, her mouth slightly open. "You want me to, what?" she asked, her voice full of disbelief. "I need an heir," Chinedu said plainly, leaning back in his chair. "I don't want a relationship or a wife. I just want someone to carry my child. In return, I'll make sure you're taken care of during the pregnancy, and I give you enough money to start a new life after the baby is born." Ifya couldn't believe what she was hearing. She looked down at her hands, her fingers still holding the edge of the table. "Why me?" she asked after a long pause. "I saw you on the street," Chinedu replied. "You seem strong. You've been through a lot, and you're still standing." "That's the kind of person I want," Ifiok laughed. A bitter sound. "You know nothing about me." "You're right," Chinedu said, "but I know enough to see you're not like most people. And I think we can help each other." Ifiok's mind raced. She didn't trust this man, and the idea of having a child for someone she barely knew felt wrong. But then she thought about her life, the cold nights on the street, the hunger that never went away, the hopelessness that weighed her down every day. "I don't know," Ifiok said finally, shaking her head. "This is crazy." "It's not crazy," Chinedu said. "It's practical. You need a way out, and I need an heir. This could change your life." "Ifiok, why don't you just adopt?" she asked, her voice sharp. Chinedu's jaw tightened. "I want a child that's my own blood. Adoption comes with problems I'm not willing to deal with." Ifiok leaned back in her chair, feeling overwhelmed. "What happens after the baby is born?" "You'll be free," Chinedu said. "You'll get the money I promised, and you can live your life however you want. There won't be any conditions." She looked at him carefully. "How do I know you won't change your mind and take me to court or something?" "You'll have a contract," Chinedu said. "It will be legally binding. You'll be protected." Ifiok looked away, her heart beating fast. She wanted to say no, to walk out of the restaurant and never look back. But where would she go? Back to the streets. Back to the life she hated. She glanced at Chinedu, who sat there calmly, waiting for her answer. He didn't seem like the type to lie or make empty promises, but could she really trust him? "I need time to think," Ifiok said finally. Chinedu nodded. take 24 hours. After that, I'll move on. Ifiok stood up, her legs feeling shaky. Thanks for the offer, she said, unsure of what else to say. Think carefully, Chinedu said as she turned to leave. This is a chance to change everything. That night, Ifiok sat in the park, staring at the cloudy sky. Chinedu's words kept coming back to her. This is a chance to change everything. She had nothing to lose, no home, no family, no future. But could she really go through with this? The next morning, Ifiok woke up on a park bench, her body aching from the cold. She had barely slept, her mind going round and round about Chinedu's offer. She hated the idea of being part of such a strange arrangement, but the thought of going back to her hopeless life made her feel sick. She took a deep breath, brushed off her coat, and walked towards the restaurant where she had met Chinedu. Her heart beat fast with every step. When she pushed open the door, Chinedu was already there, sitting at the same corner table. He looked up as she came closer, his face showing no emotion. "You've decided?" he asked simply. Ifiok sat down across from him. "I'll do it," she said, her voice steady even though her hands were shaking. Chinedu nodded, as if he had expected this. "Good. I've already started preparing everything. You'll move into my home today." Ifiok blinked. "Today? Isn't that too fast?" "I don't waste time," Chinedu said. "We have a contract ready for you to sign by the evening. It will lay out everything, your responsibilities and mine. You'll be taken care of from now on." Ifiok bit her lip. "And the money? You'll keep your promise?" Chinedu's gaze was firm. "Yes. Once the child is born, you get what we agreed on. Enough to start over anywhere you want." For a moment, Ifiok thought about changing her mind. This was too sudden, too overwhelming. But then she thought about the cold nights, the hunger, and the fear of being stuck in the same bad situation forever. "Fine," she said, her voice quiet. "Let's go." Chinedu stood up and led her to his car. The drive to Chinedu's big house felt like a dream to Ifiok. She stared out the window as the city turned into wide roads and big houses. When they arrived, the gates to his mansion opened, showing a huge house surrounded by beautiful gardens. Ifiok swallowed hard. She had never seen anything like it. Inside, the house was even more amazing: marble floors, very high ceilings, and shiny lights that hung down. It made her feel completely out of place. "This is where you'll stay," Chinedu said, showing her to a large bedroom. The bed was huge, with soft white sheets, and the windows looked out over the garden. Ifiok touched the soft fabric of the bedspread, unable to hide her surprise. "This doesn't feel real," she whispered. "It's real," Chinedu said. "You'll get used to it." He turned to leave but stopped at the door. "There's one more thing," he said. "My assistant, Mr. Emeka, will bring the contract tonight. Make sure you read it carefully before signing." Ifiok nodded. "Okay." After Chinedu left, Ifiok sat on the edge of the bed, trying to understand everything. It was too much: this house, this deal, this new life. She didn't know what she had gotten herself into, but she knew there was no going back now. She was desperate and had no home. She also needed the money to go back to school. The terms were clear: she would carry Chinedu's child, and in return, he would give her everything she needed. Once the child was born, she would leave with enough money to start a new life. It sounded simple, but as she sat there, the weight of what she had agreed to felt very heavy in her heart. The next few weeks went by quickly. Ifiok got used to living in Chinedu's mansion, but it wasn't easy. The people who worked there were polite but kept their distance, and the house felt more like a museum than a home. She often walked through the big rooms, feeling out of place among the shiny floors and hanging lights. Chinedu, true to his word, made sure she had everything she needed, but he stayed distant. He was polite but cold, and they only talked briefly during meals or when he asked about her health. One evening, as Ifiok walked through the house, she found a room she hadn't seen before. Inside was a bright studio filled with art supplies, paints, pencils, canvases, and even a stand for painting. On the table was a small note in Chinedu's neat handwriting. "You mentioned you love to draw. I thought this might help." Ifiok looked at the note, her chest feeling tight. For a man who seemed so detached, this small act felt strangely personal. A week later, Ifiok and Chinedu were having dinner together in the mansion's big dining room. It was a rare moment when they both seemed relaxed. "You've been quiet," Chinedu said, breaking the silence. Ifiok shrugged. "I'm still getting used to all of this." "It's overwhelming, I imagine it would be," Chinedu admitted. He hesitated. Then added, "You've been through a lot, haven't you?" Ifiok looked at him, surprised by his question. She nodded. "Yeah, life hasn't been kind. But I guess it made me stronger." Chinedu's gaze softened. "Strength is something I admire." They talked late into the night, sharing stories they hadn't told anyone before. Chinedu spoke about his difficult relationship with his father, a man who had valued money more than family. Ifiok told him about her dreams of becoming an artist and how life had taken that dream away from her. For the first time, they felt like equals, two people who had been hurt finding a strange comfort in each other's company. One thing led to another, and before the night ended, they shared a moment of closeness that neither had expected. A few weeks later, Ifiok felt different. She couldn't explain it, but something inside her had changed. A visit to the doctor confirmed what she already suspected: she was pregnant. The news filled her with mixed feelings. On one hand, this was what she had agreed to. On the other hand, she couldn't ignore the small feeling of attachment she already had for the life growing inside her. As the weeks went by, Ifiok began to question her decision. Could she really walk away from her child? Could she give away a baby she was already starting to love? One morning, Ifiok was sitting in the garden when a sharp voice interrupted her thoughts. "And who are you supposed to be?" Ifiok turned to see a well-dressed woman standing at the edge of the garden. Her posture was stiff, and her gaze was cold. "I'm Ifiok," she said carefully. "I'm Ngozi Okoro," the woman replied, her voice full of judgment. Chinedu's sister, Ngozi wasted no time in making her feelings clear. She questioned why Ifiok was there, what her intentions were, and even what kind of person she was. "How do I know you're not just here to take advantage of my brother?" she demanded. Ifiok felt her chest tighten, but she refused to back down. "I'm not here for his money," she said firmly. "I'm here because we made an agreement. That's all." Ngozi wasn't convinced. Over the next few days, she tried to make Chinedu doubt Ifiok, questioning whether she could be trusted. Chinedu, though confused, couldn't completely ignore his sister's words. Despite Ngozi's interference, Chinedu found himself spending more time with Ifiok. He couldn't explain it, but there was something about her honesty and strong will that drew him in. Ngozi Okoro sat in the living room, her phone pressed to her ear. "I want everything you can find on her," she told the private investigator she had hired. "I don't trust her, and I'm not going to let my brother ruin his life because of some gold digger." Over the next few days, Ngozi received files, photos, and records about Ifiok's past. Among the findings was something she knew would shock Chinedu. Ifiok had a criminal record. The next morning, Ngozi barged into Chinedu's office, dropping a folder on his desk. "You need to see this," she said sharply. Chinedu frowned as he opened the folder. Inside were documents showing that Ifiok had been arrested for shoplifting when she was 17. There was also a report about her being homeless and a note about her being kicked out of art school for missing too many classes. "What is this supposed to prove?" Chinedu asked, his voice calm but cold. It proves she's not who she says she is, Ngozi replied. She's been hiding things from you, Chinedu's face hardened. Leave, Ngozi. Ngozi huffed but left the room, slamming the door behind her. Later that evening, Chinedu found Ifiok in the art studio, painting quietly. He stood in the doorway for a moment before stepping inside. Ifiok, we need to talk, he said. She turned, her face falling when she saw the serious look in his eyes. What's wrong? I know about your past, Chinedu said, holding up the folder. Why didn't you tell me you had a criminal record? Ifiok froze, her heart pounding. I was going to tell you, she said quietly, but I was scared. I didn't want you to think I was a bad person. Chinedu crossed his arms. Why did you do it? Ifiok took a deep breath, tears filling her eyes. I was a kid. My mom had just died, and my dad left me. I had no money, no food, no one to help me. I stole a few things to survive. It wasn't right, but I didn't have a choice. Chinedu's expression softened. He could see the pain in her eyes, the shame she carried. Why didn't you tell me? He asked gently. Because I didn't think you'd understand, Ifiok said, wiping her tears. People always see me as a criminal, as someone who's not good enough. I didn't want you to see me that way too. Chinedu stepped closer, his voice firm but kind. Ifiok, I don't care about your past. What matters to me is who you are now, and I see someone strong, someone who's been through hell and kept going. That's what I care about. Ifiok looked up at him, surprised by his words. You really mean that? I do, Chinedu said. But from now on, no more secrets. I want to know everything, no matter how hard it is. Ifiok nodded, relief washing over her. For the first time in a long time, she felt like someone truly saw her. Not just her mistakes but who she was beneath them. Ifiok stood in the garden, her hand resting on her growing belly. The air was cool, the scent of fresh flowers all around her, but her mind was far from peaceful. She couldn't shake the growing feelings she had for Chinedu. He had surprised her in so many ways, showing her kindness and understanding when she had expected only coldness. But those feelings terrified her. Falling for Chinedu wasn't part of the deal. Inside the mansion, Ngozi paced the living room, her phone in hand. Her conversation with Amora, Chinedu's ex-girlfriend, had gone exactly as she hoped. I'll visit soon, Amora had said, her voice full of charm. I've been thinking about Chinedu a lot lately. Maybe we were too quick to give up on each other, Ngozi smiled to herself. She couldn't stand Ifiok and didn't trust her. But Amora was perfect. She was polished, wealthy, and most importantly, Ngozi's close friend. Ngozi was sure that Amora was the right woman for Chinedu and the child. A few days later, the doorbell rang. Ifiok, sitting in the art studio, heard the sound but didn't think much of it until a woman's voice echoed through the house. Chinedu. It's been so long. Curious, Ifiok stepped out of the studio and froze when she saw the scene in the grand hallway. A tall, glamorous woman with flowing hair and a designer bag stood smiling at Chinedu. She reached out to hug him, and for a moment, Chinedu seemed unsure. Then he stiffened, returning the hug politely but distantly. Amora, Chinedu said. What are you doing here? I couldn't stay away, Amora said with a sweet smile. I've been thinking about us. I made a mistake leaving you. Ifiok's heart sank as she washed. She had heard about Chinedu's ex-girlfriend in passing but hadn't expected to see her. Amora was beautiful, confident, and clearly still interested in Chinedu, as Amora talked happily with Chinedu. Ngozi appeared, her smile smug. I thought it would be nice to have Amora visit, Ngozi said, throwing a quick look at Ifiok. Ifiok felt out of place, like someone who didn't belong in this story. Over the next few days, Amora made herself at home in the mansion. She spent her time talking about the past with Chinedu, hinting about how they could start over. The child will need a mother, Amora said one evening over dinner, and who better than someone who knows you, Chinedu? Someone who loves you. Chinedu remained polite but distant, clearly unsure of Amora's sudden interest. Ifiok, meanwhile, tried to stay away, but it was impossible to ignore Amora's presence and the way she seemed to fit into Chinedu's world. For the first time, Ifiok felt truly jealous. One afternoon, Amora found Ifiok in the garden. "You're the one carrying Chinedu's child," Amora said, her voice almost mocking. "Yes," Ifiok replied, keeping her voice steady. "Well," Amora said, tilting her head, "I suppose I should thank you. But don't get too comfortable. Once the baby is born, I'll be the one raising it with Chinedu. He'll need someone who truly understands him." Ifiok felt her stomach twist, but she refused to show it. "We'll see," she said calmly before walking away. That night, Ifiok lay on her bed, her emotions swirling. She realized it wasn't just jealousy she was feeling, it was something deeper. She wasn't just attached to the baby, she was attached to Chinedu. "I'm in love with him," she whispered to herself, the words both a realization and a burden. But what could she do about it? Chinedu was polite to her, even kind, but he had never shown any sign of wanting more than their agreement. And now, with Amora back in the picture, Ifiok felt more unsure than ever. The next evening, Chinedu found Ifiok in the art studio. She was sitting by the window, staring out at the night sky. "You've been quiet," he said, sitting down across from her. "There's been a lot on my mind," Ifiok admitted. Chinedu hesitated before speaking. "I didn't invite Amora here, if that's what you're thinking." "Ngozi, well, Ngozi has her own ideas about my life." Ifiok looked at him, her heart aching. "She seems like she's still in love with you," Chinedu sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Amora is complicated. She left me because I wasn't the man she wanted me to be. She said I was too cold, too distant, and maybe she was right. But I'm not sure why she's back now." Ifiok hesitated, then said softly, "Maybe she sees what I see, that you're not cold. You just don't let people see the real you." Chinedu's eyes met hers, and for a moment, the tension between them felt almost unbearable. He reached out gently, covering her hand with his. "Thank you," he said quietly. Seeing his touch, Ifiok's heart pounded in her chest. She wanted to tell him everything, how she felt, how much he had come to mean to her, but the words caught in her throat. Instead, they sat in silence, their hands still touching as the night went on. Amora's presence in the mansion was like a dark cloud that wouldn't go away. Every moment she spent with Chinedu seemed planned, every glance at Ifiok filled with dislike. Ifiok tried to keep herself busy, staying in the art studio or taking long walks in the garden, but the tension was impossible to ignore. Ngozi, meanwhile, used every chance to make Ifiok look bad. "She doesn't belong here," Ngozi said to Chinedu one evening. "You've done enough for her. Once the baby is born, send her on her way. And Amora, she's the right woman for you. She always was." Chinedu's patience was wearing thin. "Ngozi, this isn't your decision," he replied coldly. "Stay out of it," but Ngozi wasn't one to give up easily. One evening, Amora cornered Chinedu in his office. "I don't know why you're being so stubborn," she said, leaning against his desk. "We were good together once. We can be again. Think about it, Chinedu. This child will need a mother. I'm the perfect choice." Chinedu looked at her. "Amora, you left because you couldn't handle who I am. You wanted me to be someone else, someone more open, more available. I'm not that man, and I never will be." Amora flinched but recovered quickly. People change, Chinedu. Maybe we could try again, for the child's sake. Chinedu stood, his voice firm. This child will have everything they need. If that includes a mother figure, I'll find one on my own terms, not because you suddenly regret leaving. I don't need you, and I don't want you back. Amora's face fell, and for the first time, her confidence wavered. You're making a mistake, she said quietly. No, Chinedu replied. The mistake was ever thinking you cared about me more than what I could give you. Please leave, Amora. This is not your home anymore. The next morning, Amora packed her things and left the mansion. As she got into her car, she shot Ifiok a glare that sent chills down her spine. Enjoy this while it lasts, Amora said bitterly. You won't be here forever. Ifiok said nothing, watching as the car disappeared down the long driveway. Ngozi was furious when she learned that Chinedu had sent Amora away. What are you thinking? She snapped at him. Amora is perfect for you. That girl, she spat, referring to Ifiok, is nothing but trouble. You're risking everything for her. Chinedu, his patience at its limit, shot her a cold glare. Enough, Ngozi. This is my life, my child, and my decision. I won't have you interfering anymore. Ngozi's jaw tightened, but she said nothing. Instead, she retreated to her room, her hatred for Ifiok burning hotter than ever. Though Amora was gone, Ifiok couldn't shake the feeling of being unwanted in the house. She could sense Ngozi's anger every time they crossed paths, and even though Chinedu had defended her, Ifiok still felt like an outsider as the weeks passed and her belly grew. So did her attachment to the baby. She found herself talking to the child as she painted in the studio, but there was always a shadow over her thoughts, a reminder that this wasn't her baby to keep. One evening, as Ifiok stood on the balcony watching the sunset, Chinedu joined her. He leaned on the railing beside her, his face calm. Are you okay? He asked softly. Ifiok hesitated, then nodded. It's just hard sometimes. I feel like I don't belong here. Chinedu turned to her, his gaze steady. You belong here, Ifiok. Don't let Ngozi or Amora make you think otherwise. Ifiok smiled faintly. It's not just them. It's this whole situation. I didn't expect to feel like this. She rested a hand on her belly. Chinedu looked at her for a moment, then said, You've been through a lot, and you've handled it better than most people would. You're stronger than you think. Ifiok looked at him, her heart aching. She wanted to tell him everything, how much she cared for him, how much this child already meant to her, but she couldn't bring herself to say the words. Instead, she said, Thank you, Chinedu, for everything. They stood there in silence, each lost in their own thoughts, the unspoken feelings hanging heavy in the air. The tension in the Okoro mansion was thick. Ngozi's dislike for Ifiok was clear in everything she did. Every small kindness Chinedu showed Ifiok seemed to make Ngozi angrier, and it was only a matter of time before she did something about it. One morning, Ngozi stormed into Chinedu's office, her face red. You're letting that woman ruin everything, she snapped, slamming a folder onto his desk. What now, Ngozi? Chinedu asked, his voice tired. She's playing you, Chinedu. This isn't about the child, it's about your money and your name. How do you know she's not lying about everything? Chinedu's patience finally broke. He stood up, towering over his sister. Enough, Ngozi. I've told you to stay out of this. Ifiok is here because I chose her. If you can't accept that, maybe it's time for you to leave. Ngozi's mouth dropped open in shock. You're choosing her over your own family. I'm choosing peace over your constant interference, Chinedu replied firmly. This is my life, and you don't get a say in it anymore. Ngozi stormed out of the room, her heels clicking angrily on the marble floor. But she wasn't finished, not by a long shot. A few days later, she called a lawyer she knew, hoping to find a way to challenge Ifiok's place in Chinedu's life and, if possible, the agreement they had made. Ifiok sat in the nursery, running her hands over the soft blankets in the cribs. The room was beautiful. Painted in soft colors, with toys and books neatly arranged. It was everything a child could want, but every time Ifiok looked at it, her chest felt tight. She had agreed to this arrangement thinking it was just one child, but now, as the twins grew inside her, she couldn't ignore the love she already felt for them. The thought of giving them away after birth felt impossible, yet she didn't know how to tell Chinedu. Chinedu had been different lately. Though he still seemed calm, Ifiok noticed the small things he did, making sure she had everything she needed, sitting with her during meals, and even asking about the babies more often. One afternoon, Ifiok was in the garden trying to clear her mind when Chinedu joined her. "You should sit," he said gently. "The doctor said to avoid standing for too long." Ifiok smiled. "I'm fine, Chinedu." "You worry too much, someone has to," he replied, his voice soft. They walked together for a while, and for the first time, Ifiok felt like she wasn't just part of a contract, she felt cared for. A week later, Chinedu insisted on going with Ifiok to another doctor's appointment, though she was nervous. She didn't argue. In the clinic, the doctor started the ultrasound, and the sound of 2 strong heartbeats filled the room. Ifiok's eyes welled up, and she instinctively reached for Chinedu's hand. To her surprise, he didn't pull away. Instead, he squeezed her hand gently, his eyes fixed on the monitor. "They are strong," the doctor said with a smile. "You've got 2 healthy babies here." Ifiok turned to Chinedu, and for the first time, she saw something in his eyes she hadn't expected: emotion. "They're amazing," he said quietly. As they left the clinic, Chinedu walked beside her, unusually quiet. When they reached the car, he turned to her, his face serious. "Ifiok," he said, his voice low, "I need to tell you something." She looked at him, her heart racing. "This started as a business arrangement," he began, his tone uncertain, "but it's not that anymore. I didn't plan for this, but somewhere along the way, I realized I care about you more than I've cared about anyone in a long time. I didn't expect it, and honestly, it scares me, but it's the truth." Ifiok stared at him, her breath catching. "Chinedu," he stepped closer, his eyes searching hers. "You've changed everything, Ifiok. I can't imagine my life without you or these babies. I want more than just this agreement. I want us to be a family." Tears streamed down Ifiok's cheeks as she laughed softly, shaking her head. "I've been in love with you for a long time, Chinedu," she admitted. "I just didn't think you'd ever feel the same." Relief washed over Chinedu's face as he pulled her into his arms. "You don't have to worry anymore," he whispered. "We'll figure this out together." At that moment, Ifiok felt the weight of her fears lift. For the first time, she didn't feel like she was alone. The days after their confession were filled with a mix of excitement and uncertainty. For the first time, Ifiok felt a sense of belonging in Chinedu's life, and he seemed lighter, as if he had shed the walls he had carried for so long. They spent more time together, talking about the future. Chinedu spoke of the changes he wanted to make, how he wanted to be more present for his children than his father had been for him. "I don't want them to grow up feeling like they don't matter," he admitted one evening as they sat in the nursery. "My father was obsessed with work, with control, and it made me feel like I was just a piece of his legacy. I don't want to repeat that mistake." Ifiok placed her hand on his. "You won't," she said softly. "The fact that you're even thinking about this shows you'll be a great father." Chinedu gave her a faint smile, but his eyes betrayed his fear. The night of the twins' birth came sooner than expected. Ifiok had been feeling uncomfortable all day, but she dismissed it as normal. However, by evening, the discomfort turned into sharp pains. Chinedu found her clutching her belly in the living room. "It's happening," she gasped, he sprang into action, calling the doctor and rushing her to the hospital. The drive was tense, but Chinedu held her hand the entire way, his calm demeanor hiding the storm of emotions inside him. At the hospital, everything moved quickly. Ifiok was taken to the delivery room, and Chinedu refused to leave her side. Despite the staff's suggestion that he wait outside, "I'm staying," he said firmly, holding Ifiok's hand. The hours that followed were intense, filled with cries, encouragement, and moments of silence that felt endless. When the first baby's cry filled the room, Ifiok burst into tears. "It's a boy," the doctor announced, holding up a tiny wriggling baby. Before they could fully process the moment, another cry followed. "And here's your girl," the doctor said with a smile. Ifiok was exhausted but overwhelmed with joy as the babies were cleaned and wrapped in blankets. When the nurse handed her the twins, she felt a love so deep it was almost painful. Chinedu stood by her side, his usually controlled expression softened by awe. He reached out hesitantly to touch his son's tiny hand, then his daughter's. "They're perfect," he whispered. Later that night, after the babies were settled in the hospital's observation room, Chinedu sat by Ifiok's bedside. She was resting, but when she opened her eyes and saw him, she smiled. "You did amazing," he said softly. "So did you," she replied. Chinedu hesitated, then said, "I'm scared, Ifiok," she frowned. "Scared of what?" "Being a father," he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know if I'll be good at it. What if I fail them? What if I let them down the way my father let me down?" Ifiok reached for his hand, squeezing it tightly. "You won't fail them, Chinedu. You're already showing that you care, that you want to be there for them. That's what matters." He looked at her, his eyes glistening. "I don't know what I'd do without you, Ifiok. You've given me something I didn't even know I needed." Ifiok smiled, tears forming in her own eyes. "And you've given me a family, something I never thought I'd have again." Chinedu leaned down, pressing a gentle kiss to her forehead. "We'll figure this out together," he said. The mansion was no longer quiet. The sound of babies crying, cooing, and giggling filled the air, and with it came a warmth that had been missing for so long. Chinedu and Ifiok adjusted to their new roles as parents, working together through sleepless nights and early mornings. Ifiok had never imagined this life for herself, but it felt right. Her days were spent caring for the twins and sneaking in moments to sketch while they napped. Chinedu, despite his initial fears, quickly grew into his role as a father. He was attentive, protective, and above all, deeply in love with the little family he and Ifiok were building. Ngozi stayed away for the first few weeks after the twins were born. She had been angry when Chinedu dismissed her opinions and sent Amora away. But something changed when she saw Chinedu and Ifiok with the twins during a surprise visit. Chinedu was holding his daughter, rocking her gently, while Ifiok sat nearby feeding their son. The scene was simple, but it touched something deep within Ngozi. Later, when Chinedu was alone in the living room, Ngozi approached him hesitantly. "I was wrong," she said, her voice quiet. Chinedu looked up, surprised. "What do you mean?" "I've been fighting you on this, trying to control something that wasn't mine to control," Ngozi admitted, "but seeing you with them. I understand now. You've built something beautiful, Chinedu, and I'm sorry for trying to tear it apart." Chinedu studied her for a moment, then nodded. "Thank you, Ngozi. It means a lot that you're saying this." Ngozi turned to leave, but then she paused. "If you ever need help with the twins, or anything else, I'll be here." With Chinedu's encouragement, Ifiok began to share her artwork again. He helped her connect with galleries and collectors, and soon her pieces were gaining recognition. One evening, she returned home after an exhibition, exhausted but glowing with excitement. "They sold 3 of my paintings," she told Chinedu, holding up a check. I'm proud of you, he said, pulling her into a hug. Balancing her art and motherhood wasn't easy, but Ifiok felt fulfilled in a way she never had before. She had a family, a career, and a future that felt bright. One evening, after the twins were tucked into bed, Chinedu asked Ifiok to join him in the garden. The moonlight bathed the space in a soft glow, and Ifiok couldn't help but smile at how beautiful it all was. Chinedu held a small envelope in his hand. "Do you remember this?" he asked, showing her the contract she had signed months ago. Ifiok nodded, her heart racing. This was how it all started. Chinedu said, his voice steady, "But it doesn't mean anything to me anymore." He tore the contract in half and let the pieces fall to the ground. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. "I don't want a contract between us," he said, dropping to one knee. "I want love. I want you, Ifiok. You've changed my life in ways I never thought possible. Will you marry me?" "Not because of the twins, not because of an agreement, but because I love you." Tears streamed down Ifiok's face as she nodded. "Yes, Chinedu, 1,000 times yes." He slipped the ring onto her finger, and they kissed under the stars, their future sealed with love instead of obligation. A few weeks later, Chinedu and Ifiok stood together in the garden where he had proposed, surrounded by close friends, family, and the twins. They exchanged vows in a simple but heartfelt ceremony. Ifiok wore a flowing white dress, holding a bouquet of soft pink roses, while Chinedu stood tall in a tailored suit. The twins, dressed in tiny matching outfits, cooed softly in their seats nearby. "I promise to love you, to support you, and to build a life with you," Chinedu said, his voice steady despite the emotion in his eyes. Chinedu said, his voice steady despite the emotion in his eyes, "And I promise to stand by you, to cherish you, and to love you with all my heart," Ifiok replied. As they kissed, the guests clapped and cheered, and the twins let out happy giggles, as if they understood the significance of the moment. In the months that followed, life settled into a beautiful rhythm. The twins grew quickly, filling the house with laughter and love. Ifiok's art career flourished, and Chinedu found himself spending less time in his office and more time at home, cherishing every moment with his family. One evening, as they sat on the patio watching the sunset, Ifiok rested her head on Chinedu's shoulder. "Can you believe how far we've come?" she asked. Chinedu smiled, wrapping his arm around her. "It's more than I ever could have hoped for." Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this story. If you did, please give this video a thumbs up, and let me know your favorite part in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe for more amazing stories. See you in the next story.